Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wellness Day, a podcast coming to every Wednesday here from the Jahangir Wellness Center. My name is Kavas Jahangir, and here from the JWC studio, I've got a very, very interesting guest today. I've got Jahan from Boheco, which is the Bombay hemp company. I would usually do a long introduction about how I'm so happy to have a guest over here and talk about what they do. But I thought today, Jahan, thank you so much for being here. I thought that you'd be the best person to give an introduction about what Bombay Hemp Company is, Boheco is. You're a co-founder in that company, so I thought you'd be one of the best people just to introduce it yourself rather than me trying to introduce it and maybe butcher it. So I thought you speaking from the heart would be the best place to start.
Oh no, on the contrary, Kawas, I think you have done a splendid job, but happy to have the mic turned over to this side.
Absolutely.
Essentially, just as you correctly described, I'm one of the co-founders of Boheco. We started Bombay Hemp Company 12 years ago, now going on 13 years.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry to interrupt you already.
Please feel free.
But yeah, I remember because I remember seeing it about 10, 12 years ago online, buying shirts and stuff like that. And
That's right.
Where it's evolved to today, you can tell us.
Absolutely no. I mean, I'm glad you saw us in the early days. Those are the days where we were sort of struggling, trying to find our feet, see where hemp really lands. It's actually a funny story. The journey of Boheco began a couple of years prior. We were 7 co-founders who eventually started Boheco, but all of us were first college friends. We met in college. We used to do a lot of social enterprise projects.
Okay.
Incidentally, one of the projects we did involved bringing solar electrification, nutrition, rural development into rural parts of India.
Okay. Interesting mix.
Yeah,
between all three,
exactly. And it was part of something called Enactus, SIFE Students in Free Enterprise. So how do you build social entrepreneurship in rural India where they sort of have their own flywheel of development and sustainability without necessarily only relying on certain tools and certain resources.
Got it.
So whilst we were doing this, we traveled all over the country. We went to rural Rajasthan, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra.
Wow.
And, I'm sure, Kawas, through your travels, you would have seen that India is a heterogeneous country. There's a joke that it's not one country, it's 29 countries in one landmass, right? In certain ways. So that's what we saw in our first line of sight. But we kept coming back to one commonality that even every 100 kilometers wherever we travel, language, custom, culture, dialect, culture, everything changed. The one commonality was hemp or cannabis, what we colloquially call bhang or ganja, was growing in every district we visited.
Really? And widely, you mean?
Widely growing. Of course, widely with the exclamation points in some areas where there was illicit cultivation going at the black market, supplying the recreational industry. But that really got us thinking to say, okay, listen, there is a few doors in which cannabis opens out to today. One is, as I mentioned, the black market. Someone's growing it in a wild reserve and then supplying the illicit market.
Which is the most stereotypical one that people have in mind.
Exactly. That's the first thing you think of, right? When you think of cannabis. Second thing that you think of is a cop or a narcotic officer finding the field and burning it down, which is door number 2. What is interesting to us was door number 3. That is subsistence use of hemp and cannabis in India. Historically speaking, we realized that India is quite an ironical country, that the rural parts of India had historical knowledge of how the fiber from hemp can be used for ropes for cattle, or you can make sweaters for winter, or you could use the seeds as nutritional items, mix it in your chutney and keep warm in sub-zero temperatures, or how you would use the bhang leaves as part of Ayurvedic concoctions to help from everything from cough and cold to fever to pain to sleep. And that got us really curious to say, why is this remain subsistent, especially at a time and era when we started back in the day, the likes of Canada, China, the United States were actually kicking off multi-billion-dollar industries with a plant that ironically and historically grew in India's backyard. There's a joke we have in our... it's a joke I would say, stemmed in fact that the first use of cannabis historically actually precedes the concept of democracy and precedes the birth of most major religions in the world. So it's something that grew in our backyard for so long, still remains in our backyard. We need to be asking ourselves some questions around, are we making the most of it? So that was sort of a big jumping off point for us.
Interesting.
Around the same time, incidentally, I have family in West Australia. During college days in the summer holidays, I happened to visit my uncles who live on the West Coast, and they said, come with us for, drive along across the coast. And we visited town after town. Town after town was derelict. There's alcohol problems, drug issues, unemployment issues. Then we stumbled across a town called Margaret River. Beautiful, complete development, prosperity. And the town 10 kilometers from it is completely bankrupt, completely broke, and no one's there. So I was curious enough. I went to the locals. What's going on? They said, we do 2 things. we grow grapes for wine, and today Margaret River wine is world famous.
Okay.
And we grow hemp or cannabis for everything else. We make our surfboards out of the fiber. We make our food out of the seeds.
Crazy how that material is so
ubiquitous. Exactly. And I mean, in a town of 9,000 people in rural West Australia where this plant never grew historically, they can build a multi-million dollar economy on it for their survival needs. What's stopping India? That was the key question, the genesis that led us to explore whether Boheco was viable or not, whether we could work with hemp, is it even legal? And that's sort of where the journey first began for us.
And as I said, I first saw it as, fabrics and shirts, and now y'all are in the space of actual wellness and medicine.
Absolutely right.
And regulated medicine, so to speak.
Exactly. And, honestly, Kawas, that's how the journey was defined for us, that we realized the first pillar we need to cross was understanding this from a regulatory or policy point of view. Something like cannabis already has an inherent stigma to it. There's already a bias from a policy standpoint or an enforcement standpoint saying, are you working with drugs? Are you working with illicit
Honestly,
materials?
the first question I was going to ask you is that how do you all break down the stereotype that the first thing that someone would think of, oh God, this is weed, I'm going to get addicted to this. Is this illegal? What is this company doing? Is there some shady business going on here?
Yeah, we got that all the time.
How do you break down that stereotype? Because effectively, you got a huge amount of stuff that is actually so beneficial today.
Yes.
But the first thing that, even honestly, if you were to ask me as a third party or layman or anything that's unbiased, my first reaction is that, isn't this just weed?
Exactly. And let me tell you, Kawas, it's been a journey and a half. When we first started, let me give you a funny story. We were at a farmer's market in a year 1 or year 2. And we had set up scorching heat, middle of summer, somewhere in India, in Mumbai, around the Powai Andheri belt. What we had done is, at that point in time, our first steps were to ask ourselves, is it even legal to be in hemp? We understood there were opportunities specifically from the policymakers that said, guys, if you are working with certain parts of the plant, it is not a narcotic. It is not classified by us. We have no enforcement on this. It falls under category of material you can use. No problems. There's no worry of discovery use. We learned through the course that there were parts of the plant, like the fiber of the plant, the seed, and the leaves, what we call bhang, that were completely out of the purview of the NDPS Act.
Got it.
When we speak of cannabis as a narcotic in India, we only refer to the flower, what people colloquially call ganja, or we refer to the resin from the flower, what you colloquially call charas or hashish. Those two parts are strictly enforced and regulated. Everything else is out of their purview. But someone needed to go to the regulator and get that clarification.
Absolutely,
and working with them. That's the only way policy moves forward. Whilst we were doing this at the back end, at the front end, we were trying to brand build and create the awareness, as you said, that how is this safe? How is this useful? And funny story was, we were at one of these farmers markets, scorching heat, couple of my founders and myself, 4 hours into the day, and we had gotten some partners who got us hemp food products. They're specifically like hemp seeds, superfood like chia seed, flax seed, etc. So we spend, one elderly Gujarati auntie comes up to our stall and we're like, auntie, this is hemp. Ye hemp hai, iska use case hai, itna hai, this, that, amino acids, protein, vegetable protein, all of that.
All the buzzwords that you see on Instagram today.
All of them and more, okay? 3 minutes into my pitch, into my monologue, she stops us and she says in Hindi, but ham to non-veg hai.
Now, right, ham.
So we're not starting at zero, we're starting at sub-zero in terms of awareness. That's where the journey first began. There's another funny story. When we first began, we started experimenting with other hemp materials. One of them was a hemp type of concrete that we had started doing research. Yes. So it's a material that sequesters carbon and gets harder over time. So very good for structural foundation. Because we realized you have to start with the fiber, because that's less sensitive, more acceptable. You can work in textiles and concrete.
Yeah, you're not consuming it.
Exactly, not consuming it. You have to start by wearing it, then applying it, then consuming it. So that is the journey we defined at Boheco. A couple of my founders had gone to meet a top architect and they were describing the technical features of this concrete. He stops them dead in their tracks and says, listen, if my building is on fire with this material, will I get high? Now, how do you explain to him your priority is leaving that building at that point in time? Forget about its intoxicating effects. But that's where our journey of awareness began. Literally pulling up education from a sub-zero level, helping people understand that, first of all, this is a great material to wear. It's on par, better than cotton, linen. It's a natural fiber. The second part of our journey moved into hemp seeds and hemp foods, explaining how nutritional this is, how the fact that there's a saying that India exports wheat but imports bread. And it's a common saying in the agriculture terms. And you see the same phenomenon with things like flax.
Right.
Flax is not natively, it's a European crop. It's not an Indian crop.
Correct.
But it's what we rely on as a superfood today. So our argument to the FSSAI, who we worked with in industry partners for about 5 years, was...
They're the regulators for this.
They're the regulators, the Food Safety Standards Authority of India under the Ministry of Health. Absolutely right. But they needed time to be convinced themselves to say, okay, this can be classified as a superfood material. This is the guidelines. This is the compliance you need. And it's a long drawn affair, as yourselves know as well. So we started our journey with that. In that navigation side of things in 2016-17, it took 3-4 years. Finally, in 2020-21, at the height of COVID, the FSSAI approved the hemp seeds that can be used as a superfood.
So anything that someone had to consume, basically.
Absolutely. You can consume it. There are safe limits. There are certain criteria you need to meet. But it took a lot of effort to even define it because it never existed in the first place in India.
Absolutely.
So a lot of knowledge is globally derived. What is Canada doing? What's Australia doing? What's Europe doing? What are safe levels for India? How do you retrofit this for our regulatory and cultural requirements? And then finally, the journey took us to working with the hemp leaf, what we call bhang, and extracting key cannabinoids like CBD and THC, and dealing with areas, key unmet medical needs in India like chronic pain management, insomnia, stress disorders.
Sleep is such a big one.
It's a huge issue. But life has come full circle, Kawas, that from the days of an auntie asking me, is ham is non-veg, to today, when we go to a flea market, it's the 65, 70-year-old population generation saying, hey, I've used CBD gummies for my sleep when I went to visit my son in the US.
Really?
You guys are making this available? Is it safe? What dosage should I take? I took this previous dosage. How does this interact with my medicines? How will this help with my wellness? So inherently, through external variables, hyper-digitization, exposure, people themselves have seen an uptick in knowledge and influence as well.
That's so interesting to hear, because I would think that, to be the younger generation who would be fastest one to adopt this.
Yes, absolutely. That was our natural thought as well. But you'd be surprised that I read a statistic that almost 60% of the consumers of cannabis medicinally globally are now people above the age of 55 or 57 years old. So it is the septuagenarians and the octogenarians that are consuming cannabis for medical purposes to manage osteoarthritis, late-stage cancer, their quality of life in different settings, for their sleep, for their anxiety, and are seeing the benefits that it was actually modeled in towards, at least from a medical
that's, I mean, as you said, it's testimony to the time that is taken to you to build that confidence with people. But coming to the other question then is that how do you build that confidence with doctors and the medical field then?
That's very important, and I think that pathway is, of course, a lot more complicated, where it comes down to the quality of evidence you generate. Especially the first question a doctor asks is it safe, is it tolerable, and is it effective, and is it addictive or non-addictive? These are the four edicts of what they are thinking about with a new form of medicine or new form of therapy, as I'm sure you and the team have seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was where, when we first began, we began by using the cannabis leaf as and the extract from this, thinking because this is licensed as an Ayurvedic medicine under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, not under the NDPS Act.
Okay.
It's an Ayurvedic medicine. It would be Ayurvedic doctors only who would be prescribing it. You would be surprised that in the spectrum of pain today, when we speak of pain and managing pain from a pharmacological point, the options are limited. We speak of paracetamols, NSAIDs or anticonvulsants, pregabalin, gabapentin on one side. We speak of opioid analgesics, your morphine, tramadol, tapentadol, fentanyl on one side. On one side, the medicines, opioid analgesics are tough to access for patients. On the other side, from a regulatory point, and from the other side, patients either have dose tolerance or they say
do anything.
Renal issues, gastric issues. So are people supposed to live in pain for the rest of their lives? That is exactly what we realized, to our surprise, that today almost 70% of the doctors, we have about 1,000 doctors prescribing our medicines. 70% of them are from modern medicine, anesthesiology, oncology.
These are allopathic doctors.
Yeah, allopathic doctors, and 30% are Ayush doctors.
Right.
And the reason being because they are seeing that this is having an instant effect in their patients. Pain relief and pain perception is being managed almost instantaneously, which is unheard of from an Ayurvedic stream of medicine. When you think Ayurveda, you think 2-3 months, long gestation period, then the effects kick in. You don't think 15 minutes in the effects kick in. So that is, it was sort of like an antithesis to the conventional Ayurvedic side. That's where case and evidence, case literature first began to build up, and we realized from a hypothesis, okay, we're always stumbled onto something very interesting. But we realized there is one commonality covers between the medical use of cannabis and Ayurveda in general. A lot of the information is anecdotal. What works for me doesn't work for you. What works for my mom doesn't work for my dad.
Okay.
How do we get this into a clinical manner where it becomes strong and palatable enough for even the highest specialization of doctor to actually take this seriously? Because one side is the unmet medical need and serving it urgently. The other side is having enough clinical data to strongly support
absolutely. And that's really what I wanted to come to is that,
yes,
and to bring out is that you all are actually doing clinical trials where this, with allopathic doctors, with leading oncologists for, in cancer. I know that we're doing this. I mean, full disclosure, we are doing a clinical trial together with our clinical trial company as well for one of your products. So
that's right.
But the point I wanted to make is that you all have done this for many of your products now.
Absolutely. From
a clinical trial standpoint, as exactly what you said, it's not just anecdotal, it's scientific, evidence-based now.
Absolutely. You're 100% spot on, Kawas. One of our key features or highlights at Boheco has been, we've been the first hemp or cannabis company in India's history actually doing human-grade clinical trials. We started with the...
And this is all regulated clinical trials.
Completely regulated, with IC approvals,
like, let's
relevant
do this
permission.
tomorrow kind of thing.
No whimsical element to this. It's completely structured, objective of what we want to achieve. We actually started with open label studies, 4 clinical trials at the National Institute of Ayurveda in Jaipur, in areas like knee-based osteoarthritis, where we studied the VAS and WOMAC scales, topical use of a cream for eczema, for eczema and atopic dermatitis. We studied the EASI and the SCORAD rankings. With topical products, build confidence, moved into consumable medicines for sleep and stress disorders, where we took it a notch further. We said, not just limiting it to qualitative scales like PQSI or Hamilton's Anxiety Rating Index.
What is PQSI?
It's the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. These were the types of scales we started using, but we also began studying how this works on your cortisol levels, your amylase levels, to show that it's directly linked to your stress markers and how this is lowering your stress markers over the course of time.
Which actually even comes down to using this from a wellness standpoint, not just from a...
Yes.
As you said, we've been talking about pain and stuff like that. But
exactly.
In a lot of your products can be used as preventative.
Exactly. And in the preventative wellness space, we're seeing a huge uptick, particularly in areas like insomnia, as you correctly mentioned.
Right.
Sleep is one of the unassuming disorders that has enveloped India like a cyclone, especially post-COVID.
Absolutely.
Almost everyone we know or some of their family members have some type of insomnia or some type of sleep disorder.
But people don't even know that they have.
They don't know that they have it. And as you know, India is not natively a pill-popping nation. We don't consume SSRIs, SNRIs, benzodiazepines on a general convention. People are averse to this. They prefer a natural, plant-based, holistic line of treatment. But unfortunately, the lines of treatment in that magnitude are limited. And that is where we understood there is great potential with, for example, one of our medicines, the oral tincture for sleep. It's had tremendous results, the same one that we trialed. But it didn't stop there. It started with an Ayurvedic medical institute doing clinical trials. But today, just like with yourselves, we've also partnered with the Tata Memorial Hospital. We have about 5 human-grade clinical trials ongoing in palliative care, breast cancer, oral cancer, lung GI.
These are all proper institutes that you're, tying up with to get these things done. So it's backed with, as again, I keep coming back with that, with science and evidence. And I mean, even the funding that you received is, you've got institutes like Ratan Tata's funding coming in to you all. So there's obviously, again, I keep coming back to break down that stereotype that this is not just a weed company or hemp company selling drugs for, I mean, I don't mean to say that, but you know what I mean.
I 100% agree.
Of that. So, I mean, it's fantastic in terms of what you're doing from that and now how you got to that wellness space.
Absolutely.
I will come back to one question that I was thinking about while you were talking about, particularly the sleep and that aspect for wellness and things like that.
Absolutely.
again, how do you address the stereotype of me getting addicted to it?
No, I think that's a very important question. Again, it comes down to the level of safety data and information.
Yeah.
Look, I'll be very clear with you. A lot of Western countries, whenever we think of cannabis in the West or the United States or Canada, the dose of THC, that is the key compound that works on pain perception, but also gets people high, so to speak, from a recreational point. The dose of THC on average is 10 to 20 times stronger than the dose of medicines in India today. So, for example, when we utilize our medicines, the doses of this are always at a low dose, within the single to early double digit mgs of THC. At those levels, cannabis is biphasic. That is, when you have a low dose of it is when therapeutic efficacy kicks in. Is when you go higher and higher in dose where the ill effects and the adverse events start kicking in.
I see.
So that's why you would have noticed a lot of addiction and habit forming risks and issues come arising out of the West in the US and Canada, where someone goes to consume it recreationally, they smoke the cannabis flower. The THC in those, say for example, if mine was 1 milligram, theirs is 200 milligram or 100 milligram. So it's 50 to 100 times the dosage, which has not been proven safe from an addiction point of view from that spectrum. But from India, because it's the first generation activity, even some of the clinical trials we run, we actually measure addiction scales to show that how consuming this over a course in a period doesn't result in addiction or habit forming tendency. What we also do is we map it interestingly with the cohort data we get observationally from patients we deal with, because we have our telemedicine, digital medicine system. We have doctors, Ayurvedic doctors in-house who consult with, I think now they've, one of our doctors has consulted with 30,000 patients over the last year and a half. The other one, a lot of data and people and materials. One thing we realized that is very interesting is there's a concept called planned obsolescence, right? In products, you make a product deliberately obsolete to a certain time frame where someone needs to come and buy it again. We are facing a good problem. We are facing the inverse of this. Our sleep medicine has worked so well that it's helping people recover from the insomnia.
So they don't need it anymore.
They don't need it anymore.
Well, that's
so because it's a great thing. We are doing good for society.
Absolutely.
It becomes an SOS function. They are not habituated to needing to take this. And that level of base of real world evidence combined with the clinical evidence we generate builds a very strong argument in the minds of patients as well as doctors and experts saying, okay, you know what? This is absolutely fine. They're thinking logically. The material they're giving me is in some random oil from US or Thailand where I don't know the components. I know what's in it. I know how much I need to give. I know what I need to watch out for in a patient.
And honestly, your goal is in the right place. You're not out there trying to exploit people, as you said.
Exactly.
Getting them to keep buying the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely. The goal is eventually to be able to help patients, whether it's managing pain or sleep. The goal is to be able to break the cycle with them. One thing we've learned is that, when we speak of wellness as a larger concept, it is not just about addressing illnesses. It's more focused on addressing the internal harmony of your biological function. And combining these two becomes very, very critical. One thing we have noticed with the patterns and trends is people are turning to natural alternative solutions, but not always as a direct replacement to what they already have.
It's like a supplementation or complementary.
Exactly. It's an adjuvant or a complement to what you're already doing. In fact, we have amazing stories, specifically on this front. I had a patient reach out to me 2.5 years ago, elderly gentleman in his mid-70s through a personal friend, and he was on clonazepam to sort of manage his insomnia. But the problem was, it was bringing about more insomnia. So he said, what do I do? Where do I go? We had put him on one of our sleep medicines, the same medicine that we were just referring to. Now, after 2 years, the amount of clonazepam he needs to consume is down by nearly 75 to 90%. So that is the risk function of another drug being lowered whilst being on a low dose of our medicine, only when he needs on a SOS basis. The same thing we notice with stage 4 cancer patients, intestinal cancer, end of life care. They're in enormous amounts of pain. They can't even get up, they can't eat. That's not the quality of life that we want to leave people with. They are on morphine, but as we understand, when you take morphine, you can only take it at a hospital. It involves a huge amount of paperwork. You only get limited doses. You don't get the dose. You're waiting for it to come. You can't expect someone to live the end of their days that way.
Absolutely.
But one of the patients came to us, late stage intestinal cancer on morphine in agonizing pain. I still recall by day 2, we had put him on our strongest medicine. His dose of morphine was down 50%. By day 5, he was off morphine, only on our medicine.
Wow.
He lived for 15-20 more days because he was end of life, of course. But those 15-20 days, he could eat on his own, he could bathe on his own, he could spend time with family, he could spend those last moments. And that is the one thing the family left us with, saying in 6 years, he suffered from 5 or 6 years of cancer. They said the last 15 days of his life were the happiest we've ever seen him. I mean, how do we attach a price tag to something like that?
I was just going to say that. That's invaluable.
Absolutely invaluable. And that gives us a satisfaction of knowing we can go to bed at night with ease and comfort, knowing we're making a difference in people's lives.
That's extremely moving also, that particular story.
And we see these stories. I have 3 of that just from last month. You won't believe it. So sometimes you have to balance your emotions. The founder saying, okay, I'll tell my family, but I have to be stoic about it.
I can understand that.
I mean,
so what are your favorite Boheco products? And
my favorite ones, I think, are more the muscle pain ones, because I was an athlete or sportsman.
You've actually given one to me, which actually has been helpful.
Oh, that's great. No, I'm glad to hear that. Thank God. Okay, good. Good. There's more evidence coming out.
So you use that. You don't get high on your own supply though.
No, I think that's the rule number 1 of No, absolutely with you. I get that question a lot as well. One thing we realize is that we've reached that stage of life where if you say high on my own supply, if my supply is making someone's life different, that's a high I need.
That's nice. I like that.
So I mean, honestly, for me, I use the topical products, the sprays, the balms, the oils. What's funny is a lot of the medicines are very close to me and my family, because I work at the back end with my R&D team, the formulation guys. So even during COVID, when we were just launching some of our first generation of medicines, it was my mom, me and my wife that were like patient zero, anecdotal to understand how it's working, because my mother had breast cancer, she had chemotherapy. So I remember there was one incident where we have an oral capsule, oral tincture, one of the tinctures we're studying, even part of our trials. We were experimenting with it, trying to get the dosage right, the form factor right, and we reached the final version of it. My mom had just come home from chemo on Friday. And as you know, with chemo, neuropathy is a problem. Your fingers blacken, fingers and toes swell, pain, tingling, can't sleep. I said, okay, why don't you try these drops? Just try 2 drops. Let's see how we go. And I kid you not, Kawas, I woke up the next morning, I didn't expect anything. I said, okay, maybe pain drops 1 or 2 points on a scale. Her inflammation in her feet had reduced 75% with 2 drops. I mean, it's too good to believe. It's so good that you have to see it with your own eyes. That gave us a confidence that this is working. It was the same with using our sleep and anxiety medicines. At the height of COVID, we were all sleepless, restless. Trying it on ourselves, then trying it on patients who required it, and then building the clinical data gave us this entire pipeline, saying at every stage of the way, we're building the confidence that what we're doing actually works.
That's incredible, Jahan. And the story of how you've led to where you are today, it's like a very natural progression of where Boheco is as a company. And our company sounds very sterile actually now. After the stories that you tell me, just calling it a company seems like a injustice to it. But that's where we are today. Where do you see the space in the future, particularly in terms of wellness? And where do you see the industry and Boheco going?
See, I think when we speak of wellness and hemp, one thing we've realized fundamentally when it comes down to wellness, it's not just the suppression of symptoms, it's the restoration of rhythm that becomes very important. The way to think of it is that, look, the cannabinoids we have, THC, CBD, they work as a key that fits in locks that are receptors in our body where only that key can fit. For example, we have something called a CB1 receptor in our brain and our CNS system. Only cannabinoids can fit into that. What happens is your body creates endocannabinoids like anandamide and 2-AG. And sometimes it requires a supplementation of it to be able to manage your pain, your motor function, your sleep, your general wellness, your stress, your anxiety levels. That is where this has started to play a very important role. Basically, I'll dial a little back and explain this in a larger context, Kawas. When we speak of medicine for pain or for sleep, let's focus on pain. Over the last 200 years, it started with morphine, codeine, thebaine in 1803, 1805. Those have now, over the last 1-2 centuries, become part of mainstream medicine. Where cannabis is sitting today is where morphine was sitting and opium was sitting in 1803.
Okay.
So the next few hundred years,
Yeah.
because everyone has now learned the downsides of how opiates work,
Yeah.
what are the problems and risks you face?
It's a huge, huge problem now.
Huge, and it's endemic. That's
Actually the word I was going to use.
Exactly.
Especially in the US.
And that's why, touch wood, we're lucky where we live in a country where the government tightly controls opiates.
Yeah.
But as control occurs in one area, the opportunities open up for lesser, I would say lesser concentrated, lesser abuse potential materials like cannabis medicine to fill that gap as a complement, like how you correctly mentioned. That's exactly the line that we are seeing. That India natively defined cannabis's or bhang's use in Ayurveda through traditional Indian medicine, and is now taking it into a modern pharmaceutical context. China did the same with TCM or traditional Chinese medicine with cannabis into a modern context. Thailand, Thai traditional medicine, modern pharmaceutical context. The wave is moving to take what used to be folklore or lore into modern science and attaching how ancient science works and how ancient systems work into more modern scientific applications.
Absolutely.
And that is where India already, as we understand, have huge healthcare gaps which need immediate solutions that are accessible to patients. That is where we see the next, say, half century or century of where Boheco and hemp or cannabis is going. The funny part is when we started Boheco, we started in 2013. And one of the first things we did is we sat together, 7 founders, starry-eyed founders saying, okay, what's the biggest thing we can make? And we defined a roadmap to 2063, saying, what do the next 50 years look like? I mean, I don't talk about this often, but most of the goals that we could have and should have accomplished by year 40 were already on track in year 10. So
what you're saying, I can hear it, I can believe it. Yeah.
And I guess that sort of is emblematic of how cannabis is moving.
Yeah.
And it's also a reflection of how India moves as a country. There's a saying that India moves slow for long periods of time, but when it moves fast, it moves
very
quick.
Fast, yeah.
And that is exactly the type of ecosystem that we're seeing built around hemp and cannabis in India.
I completely agree with you what you're saying in terms of this holistic aspect of, wellness overall in terms of everything. And that's really what we try and do over here, which is why what you're saying resonates so much with me, because here at the Wellness Center, the Jahangir Wellness Center, what we are looking at is traditional medicine, health checks.
That's right.
We look at therapies from all aspects. We do art therapy, we do music therapy, dance therapy, we look at reflexology. And I can keep naming stuff, and which is why, Boheco is something I want to discuss, because that's also an aspect that, people need to be aware of, and how we can plug that into holistic wellness overall, which is why it resonates so much in terms of what you're saying is that it should be looked at holistically.
Absolutely. And first of all, a real appreciation to yourself, Kawas, and the entire team and Jahangir Wellness.
Thank you.
Building around wellness is like building the most complicated kaleidoscope you would have ever seen.
Yeah, and now everyone is using it as a buzzword.
Exactly. It's in many people's minds it's a buzzword, but for you it's in your ethos, how the institute has been doing it. You just mentioned something very interesting. You're talking about dance therapy, art therapy, combining them with traditional forms of medicine with modern forms of medicine.
Absolutely.
It's a very rare occurrence in society. Where cannabis fits in is one of those spectrums in the larger kaleidoscope, where it's a supplement to make your journey from point A to point B more seamless for a human being as well. Through our research, what we learned is that it's not just our indigenous receptors. And, the funny part is our cannabinoid receptors are CB1 in the brain and the CNS, and CB2 that are in the rest of the body, the lower half of the body. The indigenous cannabinoid that is supposed to fit into this is called anandamide.
Okay.
It was discovered by an Israeli scientist in the 60s and 70s, named after the Sanskrit term for bliss, Anand.
Okay.
So how it intricately ties back into the need for the state of wellness to lead to your version of bliss is so inextricably linked to how cannabinoids, both within your body and outside your body, can actually optimize your human function.
Absolutely.
From sleep, stress, anxiety, antioxidant, your immunological function, your inflammatory markers, your pain. As you correctly said, that all of these are complicated relative concepts. And it's so heterogeneous. Getting it defined, that's where hemp or cannabis is one of the catalysts that helps towards larger missions like you guys are doing at Jahangir.
That's fantastic that you say that. That leaves a nice little bow tie on top of this entire conversation.
I hope the bow tie is made of hemp.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be quite. That's a good one. I like that. We should definitely add that as part of people's uniforms over here. In the
That's a great idea. No, actually, now we got my juices stirring also on this.
yeah.
I'm glad.
We'll talk about this offline, and then hopefully next time when we do an episode, we can both be wearing
Oh,
your hemp bow tie.
that's a great idea. Next episode in hemp attire, 100%. Both Kawas and myself.
Thank you so much for being here, Jahan. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you about what Boheco does in terms of the wellness space and how it resonates so much with what we do here at the JWC. So thank you for your time and thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Kawas. Thank you, and really looking forward to seeing the great work you guys do at Jahan.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
See you soon.
All right, everyone. Thank you all, and we'll see you for next week's episode. But before you go, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button here at the bottom. Thank you, and see you next week.